or if we pull away from the audience. I'm gonna try to water inland sea, today known as Great Lakes. This one, Lake Michigan, is so named for its size. Originally called Michigami, an indigenous word meaning great water. Prior to European exploration, this area was populated by a variety of indigenous nations, most predominantly the Potawatomi, Ottawa, and Ojibwe tribes. The name Chicago actually comes from another indigenous word, Chicagua, meaning either stinky onion or wild garlic, depending on the translation. Great news for garlic lovers. The swampy marshes that made up much of what is now our downtown loop area, full of wild onions, leeks, and ramps, meaning our town was affectionately named after its owner. Welcome to Chicago. Chicago's first non-native settler was a man by the name of Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable, who was a Haitian immigrant of French and African descent. And in the early 1700s, he and his wife settled at the mouth of the Chicago River to operate a trading post. And we are very affectionate toward DuSable. We consider him to be the father of our town. So, we name a ton of stuff after him. We got DuSable on the tour. Highly recommend hopping on the Ferris wheel for the views, or the Children's Museum for silly, goofy fun. Fun for all ages. Now we are headed underneath Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable Drive. And as we emerge from the other side, the city really opens up for you guys. It's one of my favorite photo opportunities. Highly recommend getting those phones out, those cameras, because this is, I think, the best photo on the tour. Really draws you guys in. Now I'm going to direct your attention up and to the left. We're going to get started with these three towers that sort of undulate back and forth. This is the stunning St. Regis. It was completed in 2020. This is the third tallest building in our skyline. It is also the tallest building in the world, completed by a woman-led architecture firm. That's Jeannie Gang and her firm, Studio Gang. Now here in Chicago, we're a little obsessed with Jeannie Gang. We think she's super cool. She's a Chicagoland native. She's a certified genius, and she works on a lot of really cool Chicago-based projects. But anyway, the St. Regis, it cuts a very unique shape in the sky, but actually this thing is not curved at all. Instead, each of those floors increase or decrease by 5 inches on every side. And visually, it's a little bit of an optical illusion. The colors of the glass get darker as the floors get more narrow, and lighter as the floors get wider, giving that shape even more dimension. Also, something that not a lot of Chicagoans don't realize, the center tower doesn't touch the ground. It's supported by the other two. You can walk right underneath it. Now you may be asking yourself, how does this very tall, very thin tower keep from blowing over in the wind? Well, I'll let you in on a secret. All skyscrapers sway in the wind. They have to, actually, or they'd snap in half, but they should only sway a little bit. We call that drift. We have a lot of strategies we employ to offset drift, and we're going to talk about a few of them on the tour today, but the first one is the most visual. If you look up to the widest point of the tallest tower, you might be able to make out a couple of unfinished looking, empty looking floors. Those are blow-through floors, and they do exactly what you think they do. They allow the wind to blow through the building instead of press against it, so there's less force acting on the building. That results in less drift. Makes it way more comfy for the folks up at the top. Now between this triangular tower and this black box, we have Aqua Tower. We're going to get a really good shot of it once we get between these two buildings. Aqua Tower was completed in 2009 and designed, again, by our rock star Jeannie Gang. This is her first addition to the Chicago skyline. It is my personal favorite of hers. I think it looks like tiger stripes. But the inspiration for Aqua Tower was actually topography maps. It was envisioned as a vertical landscape of hills, valleys, and pools. And each of those balconies, they are not just beautiful, they're functional. Each one geometrically unique and arranged in a way that helps to offset wind vortices, so it makes it more comfortable to be out on the balconies in the first place. This Jeannie Gang is a genius. Up ahead of us, a white building with a clock tower. Slightly to our right, it is the famous Wrigley Building. The Wrigley Building was completed in 1924, and it is Wrigley Candy Company, which you might recognize from, of course, Wrigley Chewing Gum, or maybe Wrigley Field, home of the Chicago Cubs. The building is clad in glazed terracotta tiles, which are not only flame retardant, but they're able to be cleaned, which was very important at the time because pollution would often turn these white buildings black with soot. And once a year, even today, once a year, each of those 250,000 very delicate terracotta tiles are hand washed. You've got to hand wash your delicates. This is no different. The Wrigley Building, it is designed in a style called Spanish Revival. It's specifically modeled after the Giralda Tower in Seville, Spain. Now, something to remember about these revival styles, we as a country, relatively new on the world stage at this point, hadn't yet developed our own distinct American styles. So we were essentially copying Europe's homework. So we could get it together, develop a unique architectural perspective all our own. Now, immediately behind me, immediately in front of you, is the second tallest building in our skyline, the Trump International Hotel and Tower, also completed in 2009 and designed by another Chicagoland native, Adrian Smith. Adrian Smith is sometimes referred to as the world's tallest architect. That's actually not a reference to the way that guy looks. He's 5'6", like me. It's a reference to his claim to fame, designing the current world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. And actually, if you took two of Trump Tower and stacked them one on top of the other, you would about get the height of the Burj Khalifa, which I think is crazy to think about, especially out here on the river. Trump Tower is also our first example along the tour of a design style called contextualism. Now, contextualism seeks to flatter its consonantal or in conversation with the surrounding structures. As an example, this building features 3 distinct patio setbacks denoted by these gray bands that wrap around the building, and each one of them is at a very specific height. The first is the same height as the Wrigley Building, its neighbor. The second setback is the same height as Mather Tower, this white rocket ship-shaped tower, the tallest of these 4 squished together immediately across the river. And the third and tallest setback on Trump Tower is the same height as the building's neighbor. On the other side, a black box tower that is just coming into view, called the AMA Plaza. The AMA Plaza, completed in 1973, designed by the German-born Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, very influential architect, considered the father of modernism. More specifically, black box modernism. Big black box modernism. You get it. He is most known for the concept of form following function. He was a part of the Bauhaus school. He really championed the idea of design as purely purpose-driven. Important because of its functionality, and beautiful because of the precision it takes to achieve that. And we have quite a few of these black boxes here in Chicago. Over 40, actually, very popular. We'll dig into the history of the black box a little bit later on. Right now, though, I would like for us all to gander at these 2 absolutely wacky corncob-shaped towers next door. These 2 are part of the complex called Marina City, completed in 1967 by the architect Bertrand Goldberg, who was a student of Mies van der Rohe. But he considered himself to be mostly a social scientist. He wanted Marina City to be a city within a city, a place where residents could live, work, be entertained, all within one complex. And he had the goal of attracting residents to the city center, because at the time, this river was still pretty gross. Nobody wanted to live downtown, and Goldberg wanted to change that. Even further, he sought to totally reject the black boxes of his mentors in favor of organic shapes. He is even quoted to say, "There are no right angles in nature, and you will find no right angles in my building," which is incredibly sassy thing to say. Included in the complex, we have a hotel, a full theater, the House of Blues, shopping, restaurants, bowling alley, daycare center, gym, plenty of valet parking. That's right, I said valet. They don't let you do that by yourself. And of course, a marina. And Goldberg's social experiment seeking to lure residents to the river was a total success. Marina City sparked a residential boom downtown that we are still feeling today. Now, to bring it a little bit closer back to today, up ahead of us on the left, this blue reflective contemporary tower with the cutouts snaking along to the top. This one is 111 West Wacker. And this building has actually had a pretty interesting journey. Construction on this building started prior to the financial crisis of 2008, and it only made it up a third of its projected 90 floors before construction had to halt. But in 2012, new developers took over the project and they kept the original stopping point in the form of that first cutout near the center of the building as a nod to the history of the project. Immediately below 111 West Wacker, here on the left side of the boat, is the River Theater section of our river walk. Different sections of the river walk serve slightly different purposes. We just passed through the section called the Cove. Up ahead is the section called the Water Plaza. The whole thing, 1.3-mile long riverfront trail, designed with the intention of turning our previously pretty gnarly and nasty waterfront into active public space. The entire thing originally conceived all the way back in 1909 with the Burnham Plan of Chicago, but the water of the river really only started to get marginally less gross with the Clean Water Act of 1972. And construction on the Riverwalk did not even begin until 2003. So about 100 years after the fact, we finally got our act together and completed the project in 2016. Very popular with both Chicagoans and visitors alike. I think, personally, well worth the $1.2 million investment. Up ahead of us on the right, we are approaching an absolutely massive limestone structure. This behemoth is the Merchandise Mart. And the Merch Mart was completed in 1930 to be the wholesale warehouse and trade showroom for the Marshall Field department store. May it rest in peace. With 4.2 million square feet of floor space, this was the largest building on the planet at the time it was constructed. At different points throughout history, this thing had its own zip code, its own fire station, still has its very own train station. It is also an excellent example of the Art Deco design style, which is denoted by all of these vertical racing stripes leading the eye up. It also has deep inset windows that help to reinforce that vertical movement. And this is a design style from the 1920s. It's a time of movement, of growth, of luxury. That's all really reflected here in the Mart. It has a polished Indiana limestone facade, plenty of metallic accents and repetitive geometric patterns, which are hallmarks of the opulent Art Deco style. Also has some super weird green Pez dispenser heads facing the building. Those things don't do anything except turn green, do other things on them. They are tributes to the princes of retail. Those are the heads of Marshall Field, Montgomery Ward, Woolworth, among others. Now this is my favorite area of the river, you guys. This is Wolf Point. Wolf Point is where the three branches of the Chicago River converge. The main branch we're on right now, the north branch is around the corner to the right, and the south branch we're going to head down on the left. All of them meet here at Wolf Point. And with the revitalization of the Chicago River in recent decades, this area has seen an architectural boom. Many of the shiny contemporary towers they see around you were put up within the last 8 or so years, including this one directly ahead of us that is shaped like a hot pocket. It's called River Point. It's from 2017, and actually this goofy shape is site-specific. If you look along the waterfront toward the ground, you'll see circular exhaust vents for the trains that run underground right there. And one thing you definitely can't do when installing structural supports for your skyscraper is dig through active rail lines. So their solution is this parabolic arch shape that helps to redistribute the load of the building into supports on either side, and the train is still active underneath. Next door, a totally impossible looking structure. This thing, affectionately known as the tuning fork, is 150 North Riverside. The reason this building looks this way is because of the piece of land that it's built on. Nobody used it because there are active rail lines going along the back half of the plot, and there is a city-mandated 30-foot setback for all new construction along the river, which leaves us a buildable area about 39 feet wide. So they decided to install a core-supported structure. The weight of these upper floors hangs off that core structure and is evenly distributed onto either side of Y-shaped trusses. This is also the only self-optimized building on the tour. You can check out the reflection of our boat in its weird shape. One of my favorite pictures. Drop you to. The tuning fork is also a really good example of a new trend that we're seeing in architecture, specifically in Chicago, of exposed engineering. The buildings are pretty much showing you how they're working. Those Y-shaped trusses inform the shape of 150 North Riverside. And up ahead, you have another example. This is the Bank of America building. Also had to deal with that mandated 30-foot setback. But they carved the section out and left the building supports exposed. But these big metal feet, they're not just exposed supports, they're active design elements. They're even lit up at night. And that makes sense. The same firm that built this built our tuning fork back there. Getch Partners, and these guys love to show off, love to be flashy, love to get people talking, and use the latest technology. Great news for this building, it was completed at the tail end of 2020, and therefore features some relevant technology, including a very handy hands-free elevator that you call to your floor with a smartphone app. The future is now. The past is also now, because on either side of the boat, we're about to see stunning examples of the Art Deco design style. We have the Civic Opera building on the left and 2 Riverside Plaza on the right. Let's focus over to the right for now. We'll hit the other side on the way back, because along the right side of the river, we're going to see the evolution of American architecture in real time. Our first exhibit, 2 Riverside Plaza, completed in 1929, originally the Chicago Daily News building. That Art Deco design style is reflective of the optimism of the time, when clearly nothing was about to go wrong. Later that same year, the stock market crashed, plunging us into the Great Depression. Shortly after that, we entered into our Second World War, effectively halting the progression of American architecture for about 30 years. And by the time we were ready to return, it was an entirely new generation leading the way. These are the folks that grew up during the Great Depression. They're practical, frugal, efficient, and those values are reflected in the design style of Gateway Center 1 and Gateway Center 2. They're both that black box modernism, that style pioneered by our friend Mies van der Rohe. And he said of that black box modernism style, I don't want to be interesting, I want to be good. And what do you mean? According to Mies van der Rohe, good means the buildings are doing exactly what they're setting out to do as buildings, not trying to be anything else. So for this new generation of architects, ornamentation, it's not the point. They want the beauty and the stability of utility. These 2 black boxes, by the way, were not built by Mies van der Rohe. They are copycats. They're completed by the architecture firm Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, and these guys had a nasty little habit of copying everything Mies van der Rohe ever did, eventually earning themselves a nickname, the Three Blind Mies. That's a tragic pun if I've ever heard one. I'm going to try to top that pun by the end of the tour, so prepare yourselves for that. And here in Chicago, we eventually started to tiptoe outside of our black box comfort zone, started putting up white boxes instead, like Gateway Center 3. Now officially, this style is called the international style, because the popularity of this type of building means you can find one is brighter looking. It does convey a brighter outlook, but for me, this is my personal opinion, it's a little boring, but that's okay, because we are headed straight into the 80s. The 80s are going to give us both postmodernism and contextualism. We have a great example of contextualism up ahead with this curving green building, Gateway Center 4. Shocking. 1, 2, 3, 4. The curve of this green building follows the curve of the river. And then the rippled effect of these windows on this wall closest to us, it's meant to recall the river's movement as well as color. It's contextualizing its physical environment. Also, on this wall are 2 vents that do not line up for some reason. Bothers me every single time we go by, so guess what? It gets to bother you now too. You are very welcome. And if you are disoriented by a brief trip through time, I invite you to check out the left side of the boat, reorient yourself with this giant map. That red piece in the middle marks you are here. It's a big old you are here map. And we never used to talk about this building on the tours, and I guess that graded a bit. They found that out, they decided to spend $800,000 to literally put themselves on the map. Was it a good investment though? Only you can tell. That nobody else sees this. This is for you. Do you like it? On the right, a truly huge building, just as big. It is. If it looks familiar to you,
okay, just like enjoy.
It's probably because you're recognizing it in its role as Gotham City Bank in The Dark Knight.
You just follow.
It's not a bank though. It is a post office. The largest post office in the world, actually, at the time of its construction in 1932. And we definitely needed that here in Chicago. We are the mail order catalog capital of the world. Look how many posts here is
What she's talking. Mom is going to what she's saying.
Catalogs that all arrived in the mail, along with every single little thing in it. We needed the space. But the Postal Service moved out of the old post office in 1997, and even though this building was a landmark, it fell into disrepair. It has since been fully renovated at the absolutely staggering cost of $900 million. Right. It is now home to Walgreens, Uber, PepsiCo, and it has a 3.5-acre rooftop park that's straight up larger than most of the earthbound parks near my house. I'm going to treat you guys to a little bit of historical context. Story time! But first, just a little tidbit about me. My name is Sadie. I grew up in a log cabin in the middle of rural Michigan. And I know how that can sound. You guys don't got to worry about me. This is not a Kimmy Schmidt situation. My parents are super normal, I swear. They're actually both from the Chicagoland area. They just wanted to build their own unique home, but were unable to do that in the state of Illinois due to incredibly restrictive building codes. Because as it turns out, Chicago is not super fond of primarily flammable wooden structures. For a very good reason, Chicago's past trauma, the Great Chicago Fire. The fire started a few blocks south of where we are right now on DeKalb Street. That spot, now home to the Chicago Fire Academy, because nothing can destroy our sense of irony. This event is the catalyst to a series of events that allowed Chicago to become an architectural superzone. So let's go back in time to the night of October 8, 1871. The city was unknowingly on the brink of massive destruction. Much of the city infrastructure up until that point was made of wood, down to the streets and sidewalks, and it was a rain-starved time bomb. Had not rained since July 4th of that year, and as autumn was approaching, a lot of households were stocking up on supplies to keep warm in the winter. One household, the O'Learys, kept their supply of coal in their barn. A fire broke out in that barn, and strong southwest winds carried the inferno straight toward the downtown area, and most people thought, I will be safe across the river. Unfortunately for them, at that point, this river was so polluted that there was a thick layer of oil sitting on top of the water. The river ignited, and the inferno ran unchecked through the city, eventually destroying 17,000 structures and burning 3.5 square miles to the ground. It left 300 people dead and 100,000 people homeless. The first iteration of our city was gone. So we built a second one. The Second City. That is where that nickname actually comes from. It's our rise from the ashes of our former selves. And with this destruction also comes an opportunity to rebuild thoughtfully. Architects and engineers from all over the world came to Chicago for their chance to rebuild a piece of it, and this is how we got the world's first skyscraper. A 10-story structure with an inner steel frame. This is game-changing for all of us, actually. Instead of continuing to build our cities out, we all start building up. So, flash forward about 22 years, we have fully bounced back from the fire. Everybody's copying our skyscrapers, and we're feeling pretty good. So we decide to host the World's Fair. It's actually how we get another one of our many nicknames, the Windy City. Representatives from Chicago, in an effort to impress the Fair Planning Committee, we're doing a little boasting, inflating the truth a little bit, and journalists from New York caught hold of this, started calling us windbags, blowing hot air, telling long-winded stories. So the name The Windy City is actually about how we don't shut up. I'm sure I can't relate. Good news is, we won the bid to host the fair, immediately set to work. The lead architect of that fair was a man named Daniel Burnham, and over the 6-month run of the World's Fair, 27 million people visited Chicago, were introduced for the first time to a lot of your favorite stuff, like peanut butter, the zipper, shredded wheat, the brownie, my personal favorite, the pressed penny machine, introduced in 1893, still as relevant as ever. With the success of the World's Fair, Daniel Burnham then went on to publish the 1909 Burnham Plan of Chicago, and included in this plan to optimize our city were ideas he took from highly functional cities all over the world. Stuff like streets arranged in an easy-to-navigate grid pattern, 18-foot alleyways, 25 of our 29 miles of shoreline reserved for use as public parks. Also inspired something called the City Beautiful movement. This is the philosophy that beautiful, accessible, functional cities have a dignifying effect on their residents. It's the reason Chicago has over 600 parks, the reason we have boulevards, fountains, public spaces like the Riverwalk, the incorporation of public art, stuff we can sometimes take for granted about our cities, but it makes Chicago a pretty great place to live. And guys, we are turning the boat around. Stand up, take as many photos as you would want of my beautiful city, the Paris on the Prairie. as Daniel Burnham would call it, a glass is meant to evoke the view of the traffic on Ida B. Wells' Five Below, which is a choice. I suppose you could be sitting in traffic, look up, see your situation reflected back at you, feel some kind of way about that, but the view's got to be better from the balcony. On the right, a statue among the rooftops. She is Ceres, Roman goddess of agriculture, sitting atop the Board of Trade building, an Art Deco tower from 1930. Tallest building in Chicago for about 35 years. Fun fact about the statue, she doesn't have a face, because when they put her up there, they didn't think anybody would ever be so high in the air as to need to see it. Immediately in front of us, an octagonal tower, kind of pink with a greenish sort of crown shape up at the top. That is 311 South Wacker, the building that taught us all a lesson about how birds are done. Because when that building debuted in 1990, that crown shape was lit with 1,800 very bright fluorescent light bulbs. When you have very bright lights arranged in a circular fashion, very high up in the night sky, birds will mistake that for the moon. Bad news, those birds got super lost, so now we adhere to a schedule of dimming exterior lights during bird migratory season, because they just can't handle it. Immediately behind that, probably one of the most recognizable buildings in our entire skyline. Also, the tallest. A tall, dark and handsome tower with two white antennas. The iconic Willis Tower. So, why did I call it Willis? The Willis Insurance Company purchased the naming rights for this building from 2009 to 2024. But many Chicagoans, including myself, are
we are going
still
this one.
refuse to call it anything other than its original name, the Sears Tower.
We'll go right now.
But this is a professional tour. I do have to be professional, so I will be calling it the Sears Tower. When this building debuted in 1974, was the tallest in the entire world, rises up 1,451 feet. That is 442 meters, by the way. It's 108 stories in the air. It would remain the tallest building in the world for over 2 decades.
That's a ledge.
Unseated by the Petronas Towers in Kuala Lumpur.
Huh? Yeah, skyline.
The Sears Tower was designed by Bruce Graham and Hosler Kahn of Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, and it's rumored that they got the idea for the structure from a pack of cigarettes. It's made up of 9 tubes, 3 by 3, bundled together, ending at different points. This bundled tube design is how the building is able to be so tall. It's how it's able to offset that wind drift, causing the top of the building to sway. It's a really effective strategy, also used in the current world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa. Now, as we talk about these record-holding buildings, by the way, I would like to reveal to you the very frustrating reality of how the Council on Tall Buildings records height records. The measurement starts at the threshold of the lowest public entrance, goes all the way up to the top. The tallest building in the United States is One World Trade in New York City. As we know later in case you're not, 1,776 feet, including spire. Spires are considered an architectural element, part of the design of the building. They're therefore included in that height measurement. The 2 white antennas on top of Sears Tower, those puppies are 290 feet tall, but they don't count.
No.
They're considered purely utilitarian, not a design choice. They're therefore not included in the height measurement. So despite the fact that if you had these 2 buildings standing side by side, the top floor of One World Trade would be looking up to the top floor of the Sears Tower. One World Trade still gets to claim the title, the tallest in the United States. Hi, Dad. We're not bitter. We're just sure to mention that little fact that every single architecture tour that comes to work. If you look up to the top of the Sears Tower, you might be able to make out a couple of protrusions sticking at the side near the very top. That is sky deck, the ledge, very popular attraction for thrill seekers, because it's essentially a big glass box that you step out into. You will see where slowly in the air. If you'd like to find out what that's like, you'll have to ask somebody else. For those people who would like to enjoy the views without cardiac arrest, you can see everything from inside. You don't have to go out there unless you want to.
Illinois.
However, 2 people have successfully climbed the Sears Tower. The first did it in the early 80s. His name was Dan Goodman. He used suction cups and he wore a homemade Spider-Man suit, as one does. We call him Spider Dan. Second guy did so in the 90s. He used no equipment whatsoever, just his bare hands. We call him out of his mind. His name is actually Elaine Robert. That's what he does. He travels all over the world to climb the world's tallest buildings because he says he's afraid of heights. Okay? Both men were arrested upon reaching the top. So listen, you guys, I do not recommend climbing any skyscrapers. Should you feel the need to confront your own insignificance, just purchase a ticket for Skydeck Alone and none of the jail time. It's a win-win. That's a really hammer hole. That points about those antennas by the way. Oh, check it out. Congrats, you guys. We usually don't see this on the tour. This is one of our trunnion basket style bridges raising up. Two leaves on the bridge. Over on the right here, just past this bridge that is raising, is the Civic Opera Building we saw earlier. It was also built in 1929, and it's built in the shape of a throne. The auditorium is the seat of the throne. Office towers make up the two arms from the back, meant to signify the seat of art and culture, and it is purposefully facing away from New York City because we're petty. Now, the opera company that built this building intended for the office towers to provide rental revenue to pay for the construction. Unfortunately, they finished this thing 2 weeks after the stock market crash. So, the entire thing sat empty. Opera company went bankrupt in the early 30s. Also features the name of the building engraved on the side. It's not a part of the original design. It was added about 40 years after the fact because someone decided that this building needed even more old world charm. Decided to write the name of it in Latin on the side. Civic Opera Building. It is the current home of the Joffrey Ballet Company and the Lyric Opera Company. Both truly stunning. Now we had a great example of these bridges opening just behind us, the Trunnion Baskin style bridge. The separation of those two leaves that you saw right between these two lights, that's where it opens. Now the reason we call it a Trunnion Baskin style bridge is because it operates like a seesaw with a pivot point and a counterweight. And most of the bridges, as you saw, are dual leaved, meaning there are two seesaws that open in the center to allow tall ships to safely pass underneath. Industrial tall ship traffic down this century on the Chicago River, but each one of them still works, as we have evidence. We open them about twice a year, sometimes more, for something called the Bridge Run. We have a lot of recreational sailors living in Chicago due to our proximity to Lake Michigan, so they store their sailboats for the winter along the south branch of the river. And in the spring, we open the bridges up in succession, one by one, to allow them to safely travel along the river and out to the marinas along the lakeshore. And then in the fall, we reverse the entire process, make sure everybody can safely get back into storage. We have 37 of those movable drawbridges here in the city of Chicago. That is the most of any American city. Worldwide, we come second only to Amsterdam. One of our L trains going over our double-decker bridge right here. That bridge, by the way, does also open. Here in Chicago, we call our trains L trains. That is not L as in LMNOP. We do not name our trains by the alphabet. It is L as in elevated. A lot of our trains operate on elevated tracks. And here in Chicago, we have a long history of large-scale public art installations because we like to infuse our civic experience with as much art as possible. Over on the left, one of our more recent large-scale installations, that red spiral, is Constellation by Santiago Calatrava. Over on the right, one of my personal favorite buildings along the river, the Nuveen building, was completed in 1983, and it's also a mega example of contextualism because the curve of the building follows the curve of the river here at Wolf Point. Different colors of reflective glass meant to recall the color of both the water and the sky, and then on the other side it's built with right angles, hard lines to reflect Chicago's grid style of streets. Also, for the especially observant, you might recognize this building as the workplace of Ferris Bueller's dad. It's true. And here in Chicago, you may have noticed that we have a little bit of an inferiority complex about being the second best at stuff. We hate it. The name of Second City really gets under our skin, especially since you all now know that is not what that nickname means. We are not second to New York City. Stop saying that. So when we are the best, the brightest, the top, you're going to hear about it. And in that spirit, I'd like to tell you about how Chicago is home to the world's largest permanent public display of digital art. It is called Art on the Mart. We use projectors to display digital video art onto the 2.5-acre facade of the Merchandise Mart, transforming it into an art piece. The projectors use digital laser mapping technology to shine only onto the front of the building, but not into any of these windows, so it doesn't bother anybody who is still at work when the show starts. Those projectors live in this very cute little glass and gray house on the Riverwalk on the right side of the boat. 37 projectors work together to create art on the Mart. Fun fact, by the way, each of those projectors weigh about as much as a human toddler. There's like a kindergarten classroom and a half stuffed in that box. Art on the Mart happens every single night at sundown during the warmer months of the year. I believe it is slated to start in earnest in April. So if you find yourself in the city, downtown, around sunset, highly encourage you to come on down to the Riverwalk, grab a seat, and a free art show. We're passing underneath the Wells Street Bridge right now. The next bridge ahead of us is the LaSalle Street Bridge. And on the left side of the LaSalle Street Bridge, a red brick building with a clock tower. It is the Reed Murdoch Building. That building was completed in 1914, but the story of this building doesn't start until 1930. The city was expanding its infrastructure, and part of that included widening LaSalle Street, but the Reed Murdoch Building was fully in the way of that project. So they could either demolish the entire thing, or they could do something that really irritates people who love symmetry. The Reed Murdoch Building is no longer symmetrical, and all you have to do to see it is count the windows on either side of the clock tower, and I will save you the trouble. There are 6 windows on the right and only 5 on the left because we sliced off an entire section of this building to make way for the expansion of LaSalle Street. We tried to hide it by redoing that corner ornamentation, but if you did not notice until I pointed it out to you, you're welcome. Again, this is another thing that gets to bother you for the rest of the time you're in the city. Now, over on the right side of the river, I like to play a little game called One of These Things Is Not Like the Others. Tall and reflective, tall and reflective. Definitely neither of those things is 55. Wes Wagner, that short one with the 55 stamped on his forehead. He sticks out like a sore thumb, both in stature and in style. But we love him anyway. He's a short king. He's an excellent example of brutalism. Brutalism comes from the French term béton brut, meaning raw concrete. Raw, untreated concrete is that hallmark of the brutalist style. It occurs at this really interesting intersection of ethics and aesthetics. So where it is used, it's to indicate a sense of moral high ground. Used a lot in the construction of a lot of government facilities here in the United States. Up ahead of us, a deep green building with a golden top. That is the Carbide and Carving Building. The design and construction of this building occurred during Prohibition. Very turbulent period for the city of Chicago when the distribution and consumption of alcohol was very, very illegal. Make no mistake. The Carbide and Carving Building.
You see the golden one?
To resemble a bottle of
Yeah, that's
champagne.
that's the golden one.
The 2 architects of this building were a little fixated on something they wanted, but weren't allowed to have.
golden,
So they built one for us to look at, or depending on your perspective, be mocked by. The top coated in actual real gold leaf, 24 karat gold, thinner than a sheet of saran wrap, but still shines just as brightly. And in a funny twist of history, there is now a bar at the top of that building where you can order, among other things, a bottle of champagne. Life is weird. Now the shape of the Carbide and Carving Building is boxy at the bottom and it's slimmer at the top. Very similar to the shape of this next building over here on the right, the Jewelers Building. That one's from 1926. Now the reason they're very similar is because of the zoning ordinance from 1923. It removed the height restrictions on these buildings downtown, so you could build them as tall as you wanted to, but with a caveat. The top floor could only be 25% of the area of the ground floor, and that resulted in a lot of these buildings all looking very similar. All these Jazz Age structures looking a lot alike. Now, another Jazz Age structure that had to adhere to all of those same restrictions, we saw it earlier, that white rocket ship-shaped building, Matter Tower. Right here, the tallest of these 4 squished together. You'll notice, however, it starts with a very small footprint. So the top floor of Mather Tower has to be, and is, about 9 feet wide. Next door, the London House Hotel, which I like to mention on the tour because it has the second most popular rooftop bar in the entire country. We'd prefer if it was first, but whatever. And include it, do like to recommend to those of you on the tour today who've experienced drinking at sea level and would like to round out your experience by drinking higher up. Now up ahead of us, just past the Wrigley Building, we're about to get a great view of Tribune Tower from 1925. This building is the result of a design contest hosted by the Tribune newspaper to design the world's most beautiful office building. This is the winning entry. French Gothic revival in style, elaborate Gothic carvings and flying buttresses up at the top. But then at the base of the building, you will find fragments of 150 historic structures embedded into the facade at ground level. Everything is labeled as like a pre-public museum. Pieces from some of the most important places in our shared history. Great Wall of China, Taj Mahal, the Vatican, Comiskey Park, he's also there, just as important, clearly.
Yes.
Tribune newspaper no longer lives in Tribune Tower. They moved out in 2018. That building is now full of high-end condos, because of course it is. Next door, still on the left, this glass box with a flat top, 2017's Apple Store. I have opinions about the Apple Store, but you need some background knowledge first. Architects usually view symbol and space as separate pieces of a whole. Usually you put decoration onto a space, but there's a separate iteration of postmodern design making buildings that are symbols. And the example we have classically of this is a roadside attraction shaped like a duck, like with a beak and a tail. And that's what we call this genre of architecture, a duck. A highly sculptural form that represents generally what's for sale inside. So that building, built to resemble an iPad or a MacBook, is also a duck. Moving on. Alright, still on the left we have this gorgeous Art Deco structure, lots of vertical movement, some more flying buttresses, and a very recognizable peacock logo up at the very top near the fire.
NBC.
It is NBC Tower, built in 1989 by Adrian Smith. And that doesn't seem to fit in with our Art Deco timeline, because this is actually a revival structure. The style is called Echo Deco, which is very cute, Echo Deco. It's modeled after Third Rockefeller Center in New York City, NBC's other headquarters. Now, hopping over the river, I would like to talk to you all about this triangular tower, Swiss Hotel, also built in 1989 by one of my favorite guys, Harry Weiss. Harry Weiss was an avid sailor, liked to incorporate a lot of nautical themes into his designs. Later on, that included a lot of triangles, and I mean a lot of triangles. We think it's because the triangle shape reminded him of a sail, which is adorable. And a lot of people think that Swiss Hotel was intentionally built to resemble a Toblerone chocolate bar. Which is totally fair. I personally think that Harry Weiss copied and pasted and sell. We already have a far less fancy version of this hotel downtown that you are not allowed to leave, called the Metropolitan Correctional Center. He already built us a triangular federal prison. What a guy, Harry Weiss. We already talked about that. We have talked a lot on Tuesday about the architecture to be found on both banks of the Chicago River, but we have yet to talk about the architecture of the river itself. We've done a lot to this river since DuSable first settled here. Back at that time, the mountain river was all the way back by the Apple Store, ending everything on the tower. However, Oprah never lived there. That one is a rumor, which makes it just a really big fan of that French restaurant, Cité, located in that circular portion up at the top. People saw her in the building, visiting the restaurant, assumed she lived there, but she didn't. And unfortunately, no, you cannot go to Cité after the tour today. It closed down during the pandemic. We're all really sad about that, actually. It was kind of a big loss. But recently, we know that people have been touring that space. Our offices are in that building as well. So we know that people are touring the space. We think that a new restaurant is in the works. Fingers crossed it's called the Second Cité. Were you prepared? I think it's worse than Three Blind Thieves, but that's just me. I think I'm winning for content. I'm happy with myself. So we are headed out into the basin. Captain's going to turn the boat around for this awesome photo opportunity for you guys to view, admire, photograph our skyline from back here. It looks stunning against this blue sky today. I highly encourage you guys getting those selfies, those group photos. Group everybody in Chicago. This is our famous architecture tour. Guys, if you spot somebody trying to fit like 8 people into a selfie, do the neighborly thing. Get that photo for them. Kind of cultivate a good bond. guys in the boat up here.